Yes, 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 1, 2, 3. Okay. So, okay. Oh, good afternoon. I'm Gianpaolo Pioli, President of ANCA, and next to me is the author of this book that will be presented today, From the Garden to the Glass House, and Diplomatic Look at the United Nations. Abdelkader Abbadi is our colleague for more than 20 years, was a diplomat for more than 30. He started his first article in 1967, and he has a very personal, original, and we'll see if it's contagious or not, view of the United Nations. For sure, seems like that this vision of the United Nations doesn't match with the bookstore, because this book wasn't accepted as a commercial issue of the United Nations. And so he's here. We are pleased to have him presenting and discussing the book with us. He has many ideas about everything, but especially in the reform of the United Nations, on which he worked for a long, long time. This book took 2 years, 1 year of research and 1 year of writing. And he has a formula that will tell you about this, about the Security Council, about many other things, and also a radical formula about DPI, the Public Information, that according to Mr. Arabi should be totally transformed. I don't know what that means, if with the current leadership or the future leadership, or doesn't matter. Now, just because I like to have eager to hear your presentation and have a Q&A with all our colleagues, the floor is yours, and we do a Q&A at the end. We're going to have a wine and cheese, and Mr. Abbadi at the end will bring a copy of the books to give it to you or sell it to you. I don't know what the procedure is. Okay? I get one anyway. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to thank the President and his committee for arranging this event, and his assistant, Ms. Melanie, for doing a wonderful job in informing you about this event. I appreciate their cooperation. I also thank you for your interest. I know this is late in the day, everybody is tired, many offices are closed, so I appreciate immensely your presence here and your friendship. I wish to tell you that I am an old man, but with young man's ideas about the United Nations. This book is about my career at the United Nations and about my experience in the organization. It's titled From the Garden to the Glass House, an Diplomatic Look at the United Nations. As the President mentioned, my ideas are not in conformity with those of the bureaucrats in the House, even though I was a bureaucrat myself for over 30 years in the House here. First as an officer in the Security Council, and after that as a director in the Political Affairs Department. Some of you may not know that. The book is also about the internal life of the UN, about the strengths and weaknesses, and about its future in the global society. It's over 220 pages. It covers 16 chapters, including preventive diplomacy, spying at the United Nations, believe it or not, the Security Council, the special missions I undertook, about the current state of the UN and its role in the future global society. The preface is written by Ambassador at Large Tommy Koh of Singapore. The book takes a critical look at the United Nations and offers alternative solutions to the difficult and complex problems it is facing. Let me make one thing clear. I am an admirer and strong supporter of the United Nations. Its ideals and principles contained in the Charter about peace, development, human rights, about human dignity, and about international cooperation. I have devoted my entire professional life, 48 years, in the work of the organization. I have seen the organization from a unique perspective, from inside as well as outside. I am critical of the UN because I love the UN, what it stands for, and because I hope I can make a contribution to the efforts aimed at improving its work and delivery. I look at the issues from an out-of-the-box manner, and don't be surprised if I advance bold suggestions for improving its effectiveness in the future. I am talking about 10, 20, 30 years from now. I also look beyond the UN and describe the future global society and its requirements. The reason the UN bookstore would not sell the book on the instructions of DPI is purely political. The UN cannot accept new ideas. If you read the book, and I hope you will understand why. But I leave with you this impression. Do we at ANCA accept a book of this sort, that it can be banned from the United Nations bookshop? Because my opinions are not shared by those bureaucrats who have made the decision in DPI. Where is the freedom of expression professed by the Secretary General? So let me start. Let me cover briefly some of the highlights of the book. It would not be possible to cover all the content of the publication at this time. I want to say from the very beginning that I say things about the UN that have never been said before. This is not a bureaucratic report on the UN. I offer bold solutions, perhaps too bold for some. I cover the work of the various Secretaries General, and I relate their qualities and their weaknesses, including the present Secretary General. Let me turn your attention to the Security Council. Contrary to the period of 1960s and 70s, the Security Council has, to a large extent, lost the art of serious debate. At that time, as Ali would testify, he has been here long enough also, we had what I call in my writing cultural diplomacy. The presentations were eloquent, historically well-researched, and delivery was remarkable. One had a sense of history. The debates on conflict and crisis were of a high caliber. People followed them with great interest, and the galleries were full of the public, diplomats and journalists. Today, there is hardly any debate. Most of the discussion takes place in the consultation room, as you very well know, behind closed doors. There are less open meetings, and when they do take place, they are usually of technical nature, for voting, explaining the vote, or adopting the text of a resolution, or a statement. Discussions on reforming the Security Council have been going on for a quarter of a century now, without any significant result. Why? Because the issues are exceedingly complex. At the San Francisco meeting on June 26, 1945, when the charter was signed in San Francisco, the diplomats agreed after long debate that the victorious nations, remember this, the victorious nations, US, UK, France, China, Russia, would enjoy the right of the veto. What is the veto? Some people think it's a negative vote for blocking a resolution of the Security Council or a decision of the Council. This is where we make a mistake. We view the veto as a mechanism through which we oppose some decision or resolution. But the reality is that the veto is more than simple instrument. In fact, it is a major policy in the defense of crucial strategic interest. It is not cast haphazardly. It is used to protect major political, economic, military, and strategic interest. The United States was the only member of the P5 group that cast a veto to exclude Boutros Ghali from seeking a second term. All 14 other members of the Council voted in favor of a second term for the Egyptian Secretary General. I reveal in the book that Ghali actually did not want to run for the second term. Why did he then do it? Many formulations and propositions have been advanced for restructuring the Security Council. None of them were accepted. The only understanding is that the Council should be small, no more than 24 members, and that it should be transparent. I jump a lot of pages because the President wants me to very brief so as to give you the opportunity to have the question and answer period. This brings me to the role and functions of the Security Council. In recent years, the Security Council has been inflationary in issuing statements and declarations which do not have much effect on the practical resolution of the issues before it, and you are a good witness to that. As you know, the UN is often accused of being a debating society. It is not always easy for 193 countries to reach unanimity or consensus, but the Council can do better. First, the UN should place priority on preventive diplomacy. When I was serving on the Secretariat of the Security Council, I had anticipated several conflicts, including the one on the Falkland Malvinas Islands. And I was referred to by some of my colleagues as the Oracle of the UN. This anticipation was well known in the Secretariat and made a lot of noise. It was quite a story, and if you are interested, I would be happy to give you all the details on how I was able to do that. For the time being, preventive diplomacy is clearly not the priority of the United Nations. I will just cite one fact. Peacekeeping budget amounts to $8 billion, while that of preventive diplomacy is a pathetic $1 million. This is not acceptable. Preventive diplomacy can, as its name implies, prevent conflicts and is by far more economic than sending, equipping, and maintaining thousands of peacekeeping troops. In the book, I recommend that instead of just issuing endless statements and declarations, that the Security Council actually sit as an active mediator in proactive preventive diplomacy. In this situation, the Council would call on the parties to a threatening situation to come to New York. The Council members would hear directly their grievances and point of views and eventually draft a proposal for the reduction of tension. The Council would use all its powers of persuasion and under the Charter to keep the parties, to help the parties come to an agreement to defuse the situation before it leads to a crisis or conflict. I also recommend in the book the establishment in the Secretariat of an independent crisis prevention center to work in harmony with the Secretary General and the Security Council. I now come to the department that sponsors our activities, DPI. In the 60s and 70s, when you traveled around the world, people praised the UN and what it was doing. Its personnel was respected. Today, many people have a negative view of the organization. Some even say that it is waging wars against people. Clearly, DPI has failed in its mission to project a good image of the United Nations. How to remedy that? I recommend in the book that DPI partner with an experienced and specialized company in communication which would be responsible to the Secretary General. Now I have a word about the staff at the UN. The commitment of the staff to the ideas and principles of the organization has diminished, largely through the politicization of the recruitment and promotion procedure and the almost disappearance of permanent contract. Staff are now on a short leash, short contract. They feel insecure. Staff morale is lower, and this will be denied by the managers. And this translates into their performance. What I recommend? Establish an independent commission on recruitment and promotion. On snooping at the United Nations, I have a chapter on this subject of spying at the United Nations. Believe it or not, snooping in the organization started during the discussions on the adoption of the Charter in San Francisco on June 1945. It intensified during the Cold War. There is now less, but it continues. You have all recently heard about NSA snooping on Angela Merkel of Germany, Dilma Rousseff of Brazil, and Ban Ki-moon. I touch on the offices of the Secretaries General as I have known them since Dag Hammarskjöld. I worked under 7 of them since Dag Hammarskjöld when I was an intern at the UN. The book tries to describe their character and what they have accomplished or failed to accomplish. They all had a diplomatic background and experience, except one. Guess who? I come a little hard on him in the book, but try to be objective by recounting the facts. Boutros Ghali was special. In what way? We can discuss that. As I said before, and contrary to what people think, he did not want to run for a second mandate. I promised Tariq of Egypt, is Tariq here, to reveal what happened in reality. I talk about an extremely important quality that the Secretary General must have. The current candidates for the post of Secretary General for 2017 do not even speak about that quality, and we can raise it. In the book, I make very bold suggestions. For example, I suggest that the post of Under-Secretaries General and Assistant Secretaries General Special Representative be eliminated. Offices would be headed by senior directors at the D3 level, a new level, who would constitute the executive cabinet of the Secretary General. This last one, the Secretary General, I further suggest, would take on a new title, that of International Executive Officer. You may wish to discuss this why these suggestions and why these changes. I would be happy to explain the reason for these innovations. For the time being, I would like to limit myself to saying that there is a need to depoliticize the Secretariat and to change the nature of the functions of the Secretary General. He should be an executive, not a secretary. I conclude by saying this: we will increasingly, in the decades to come, face a more global world, which will lead eventually to a global society. At the present, the world is in turmoil, largely because the multiplication of deep crises of all types require new and innovative solutions. The United Nations is very good at reforming, but not at innovating. The United Nations, in the midst of these crises, to be able to resolve them, the UN must be renovated to meet the requirements of the new age. Either it will undergo fundamental changes, or it may not survive under its present form. The Charter must be amended in a very serious way. Thank you very much for your attention.
Abbadi, and I want to open the floor to your question, and I'm pretty sure that you will be pleased to answer. We have a microphone there if you want it. Was a question, and as long as you bring the microphone, I have a question for you, Mr. Abbadi, and this is, I want you to treat us like the Egyptian. So we want a revelation about what you promised to Tariq. Okay.
I said I was going to reveal that when Tariq from Egypt, but our colleague from Egypt is here also. So Boutros Ghali had a great sense of honor and sensitivity. He knew that they would veto him, the US, for reasons that you all know. And he knew that he would be defeated, so he was very reluctant to run for second term. And how did he do it then? Why did he run for second term? Well, there is a power behind every man. It is behind every great woman, a great man, there is a great woman. It was Leah, his wife, that pushed him to run. And I got this from a very private source, very close to the family of Boutros Ghali. That's one revelation I make in the book, among many others. Thank you for the
Thank
question.
you. Other question? Yes.
I have a question, Mr. Abbadi. You certainly know that there have been a lot of writings, lengthy writings by former executives at the UN criticizing the UN and giving recommendations, and these recommendations remain unheeded. In your opinion, who or what is preventing these recommendations from being taken account of?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the beginning. Can you
As
raise
you know, there have been a lot of writings from former UN executives criticizing the UN and giving a number of recommendations to reform and innovate the United Nations. So, in your opinion, who or what is holding these recommendations from being headed?
Very good questions.